So welcome football writers, non-football writers and all fans of the Football Writers Association review programme. Nick Callow here from HaytersTV, sitting in for Carrie Brown. I'm sorry for fans of Carrie that it's me, and the beautiful, fantastic Sam Dean from the Telegraph, one of the country's leading up-and-coming young sports writers. But obviously today we're talking football here at what some people call the home of football, Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. We're looking back on the weekend of football, Sam, and some of the big stories. I mean, certainly the match I was at was the big headline one, Chelsea against Man United. And we've learnt today that Jose Mourinho is not being charged with his involvement in the punch-up or the attempted punch-up with the Chelsea coach there. What's your take on what happened there and how that story was covered?
I thought it was covered, obviously, extremely well by all the Telegraph journalists who were there. And aside from that bias, I thought it was interesting because of all the press boxes for that to happen in, the Chelsea one's probably the best one for it to take place because everyone's so close to it. All the journalists, I'm sure, who were there saw it in sort of right up close, which is interesting. I'm quite pleased he hasn't been punished for it because it just felt like a bit of, a bit of handbags and a bit of fisticuffs. Nothing particularly damaging to the game's reputation, I don't think, and anything worse than Jose's done in the past and got away with. So for that side of things, I think that's good. Move on from that. But it was good to see, and I do wonder whether he. I mean, we often, I think, as journalists and particularly fans looking in, try and sort of look at what Mourinho does and double guess it as, oh, is this mind games? Is this calculated? Has he premeditated this decision? I think sometimes we do that too much, and he's just actually lost his temper, or he's actually lost it. And I think the now famous press conference after the Spurs defeat, the respect rant, I think that was him. Very much red mist has come down, very angry. Whereas this looks maybe a bit different. I thought it's almost as if he decided it works in my favour to make this a thing about me when Ianni, this Chelsea coach, did his thing. But then you were there. I don't know if you agree.
Well, yes. I mean, it was amazing to see him reacting like that and sort of getting involved. I mean, we've seen him react. He's put fingers in people's eyes before, and he was, he was clever enough to quickly say in the press conference, it was the first question put to him, to ask what happened there, and he said, well, look, it's not about me, the guys behaved badly towards me, it's all down to a bad education, and he's apologised. Maurizio Sarri's come and told me he'll deal with it, and that's good enough for me, and we move on. I don't want him to get any more trouble, which obviously immediately tries to take the attention away from him, which is impossible with a story as big as that, and as big a match as that, when he has got involved and reacted. So I think you're probably right that in this occasion it's not the good thing to take action against him, and he will be able to move on. And I mean, the other side of that match was he was saying that it was a bad result for United, whereas I thought it was probably quite a good result for United getting that draw, and it looks like the heat is coming off him, wouldn't you say, now, in terms of his future staying on there as coach?
I think so. I think it's amazing what we might look back at that impact the Newcastle game had and think that was potentially the turning point and how close that was to being meltdown and probably him gone. I don't think anyone would have thought he'd survived the defeat by Newcastle at home before the international break as well, when it was a nice time to sack him. So it does seem to be that's had some impact. Anthony Martial looked very good, didn't he, and scoring 2 goals, which is interesting as someone who's been so, well, not poor, but he's been playing so much within himself under Jose. So that's interesting sort of development, that he's suddenly beginning to get the best out of him at the expense of Sanchez, which again I think people probably weren't expecting at the start of the season. So maybe this is the turning point. Personally, I don't think it will be. I think that squad's too imbalanced, probably too top heavy, and he plays the sort of opposite as you'd expect from a squad with that many great attacking players and so few good defensive players. But after Jose way, who are we to question? But I do think it's interesting.
Talking the size of squads, another big story that's been rumbling on since the summer and during this season too is at Tottenham, where they failed. I think the only team in the history of the transfer window did not sign a player this summer. Pochettino has said repeatedly before their most recent match, look, everyone was saying it's a bad thing, but we've made our best ever start to the season. And others are saying, well, you're going to need more players. And now Poch has said, well, actually, we do need to sign new players. I mean, the Tottenham fans seem to want new players as well, if only for backup. I mean, how do you see that situation?
Well, I think it's been quite clear that they did want to sign players. I mean, they were very much in for Grealish over the summer, and then that didn't come off for various reasons. Villa getting new ownership being probably the primary reason. So I think the spin for the weeks following the transfer window was very much from Pochettino saying it's okay, but there's nothing else he could have said really. He couldn't have come out and said, we failed, we're just going to struggle now. You know, what's that message is that going to send? So I think it's interesting. I mean, I think it's really hard to overstate how good a job Poch is doing right now for Spurs. I mean, considering everything with the stadium, with the summer signings, and the fact that they had so many players at the World Cup for so long. I mean, to keep winning the way they're doing, to have a record start to the Premier League is just like, objectively, take a step back, is a remarkable job. And Adam Crafton, my esteemed colleague at the Daily Mail, wrote a good piece this morning in the Mail saying, right now Pochettino is on top of his game more than any other manager in this division. I think that's probably fair enough. Hard to disagree with that. He
said himself though that he needs to win trophies to really show that he is a very good, successful manager. Do you think that's fair, and it's a fair criticism of him that until he does win trophies he won't be regarded as one of the great managers?
No, I don't. This is potentially I might get sort of more traditional football fans furious at this response, but trophies, I think. I mean, if you ask a Spurs fan, what did they enjoy more? Winning the League Cup about 11 years ago in a middling season, or the last 2 seasons of genuine progress and genuine excitement, and turning up every week thinking they're going to win, play some great football, and Harry Kane might score a hat-trick. I mean, if I was a Spurs fan, and I'm not, I would rather have lived through the last 2 seasons than the season won the League Cup. So I don't think winning the League Cup or FA Cup...
After that we were bored.
So I don't think winning the League Cup or FA Cup is actually going to change things. I think that's less important than the progression he's made, and I think that's probably the accepted way of looking at it by most high-ranking football executives now, that frankly the League Cup and FA Cup, I mean, we saw it here at Arsenal where we are today, it didn't placate any of the anger or dissipate any of the sort of cause any sort of the unrest to go away winning the FA Cup. If anything, it sort of channeled it further into we need to win the big trophies. So I think it's hard to judge Pochettino on that. One thing I would say on Pochettino, and I appreciate I'm veering towards ranting territory now, is there was something he said very interesting at the press conference last week when he was asking about wages and how much they're going to pay players. And he said, one day I wish Daniel Levy could come in here and sit next to me in a press conference. And I don't think he said it in sort of a genuine, Daniel's not doing his job properly. I think he said, I just wish one day, how great would that be? Because essentially Pochettino's been doing the PR for that club all summer and the PR for Daniel Levy all summer. He's been spinning the stadium, he's been spinning the signings that haven't been delivered, he's been spinning the whole World Cup situation, the inevitable fatigue they're suffering. And there's no doubt that Harry Kane is clearly tired. He's been spinning that every week, and it's been the same sort of pressure. And he's shouldering all this on himself, and he's sort of taken on all the brunt at the same time as a winning team, which I think is remarkable, especially considering their injuries too.
Yeah, and you mentioned being here at Arsenal, and that's something that Arsene Wenger had to do for many, many years, was sort of be the front man for the Arsenal board, and he used the press conferences, just like Pochettino now is, to try and explain why Arsenal were not signing players or having to let players go. I mean, obviously now, this time last year, Arsene was in his 22nd year at the club. Unai Emery's come in with a whole restructuring the club with directors of football and new people sorting out the contracts. What do you make of the whole sort of restructuring of Arsenal? Is it a different feel about the club? Do you think it's for the better?
I think it's interesting. We don't know if it will be for the better or not. I think we won't know that for probably a few years, if not maybe the end of the season. That might be the first indication. But you look at the comparison between when Ferguson left United and when Wenger left Arsenal, and United did not put a structure in place to replace him. They stuck with we will get the manager who can sort it out, and that'll be that, Edward Wood and the manager, and that'll work. Whereas Arsenal have taken the opposite approach and have decided that let's build something hopefully long term with a genuine structure and a scouting model with Sven Mislintat, a contract negotiator with Hus Fahmy, and now the head of football with Raul Sanllehi, who these three people will be able to put an actual strategy in place, which Emery will work within, and he's clearly happy to do that. He wouldn't take the job otherwise, which he couldn't have done with Wenger for obvious reasons of his power and his longevity here. But I think that in itself is a positive thing for Arsenal, that they have got this structure in place. I mean, whether that's going to be effective enough to win titles, I don't know. I mean, they haven't got the money to do it, and they're trying to be sustainable, and that's great, but they're playing against teams who can afford to spend £60 million on Riyad Mahrez when Arsenal can't. So whether having a good structure is enough to bridge that gap, I don't know. We will see, but I think it's at least a logical and sensible step forward.
I don't know how the Telegraph have been covering the latest stories about Arsene Wenger, but obviously reports over the weekend recently that he is on the verge of making a comeback into coaching or management or some sort of role in the game. He quite specifically says it'll be January next year.
He's picked his date, hasn't he?
He has, yeah.
Imagine being able to do that.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
So he must sort of know what's going on, one would think. And certainly from my point of view, covering Arsenal for many, many years, certainly throughout his whole reign here, I'd like to see him back in football. He was a very good friend of the sort of the FWA and gave great press conference, gave great copy to everyone, and is and was a great football coach and manager.
Where do you see him ending up?
Well, this is a good question. I mean, he's been linked. The Mirror reported last week that he might be going to Bayern Munich when they called that press conference. He didn't go there. Real Madrid manager is under a lot of pressure. He always sort of denied that. He always said he turned down Madrid many times.
2 or 3 times.
And he didn't like the structure of the club where you are just given players to coach, and then he likes to have control, Arsene. So, you'd think maybe he thinks he's at an age where he would work under those restrictions now, do a few years there and try and win the Champions League, the only trophy that's eluded him in his career.
It'll be interesting to see where he sort of ranks now in the sort of managerial. Are his methods as outdated as they sometimes seemed here? Is his approach now not appropriate to the modern game? I don't know, the modern player. I think it'd be really interesting to see someone like Real Madrid. I think it's probably unlikely, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, you would say a bit of a long shot, wouldn't you? But I think we sort of underestimate sort of the stock he's held in, around the world, and because we got so used to coming here for 20 odd years, listening to him and think, oh, not the same old things, and maybe the players were thinking that too. The players who played under him just only have pretty much good things to say of him. And if you went to a new club, his ideas would seem fresh to those players, and with the right budget and then a relatively easy league, who's to say he could not be a success at Real Madrid?
No, exactly. I'm reading too much into this as a journalist, I think sometimes tend to do, but I wondered whether it was interesting that the interview he gave last week was with Bild, obviously the big German tabloid.
Yes.
I wonder, as a PR move at a time of Bayern Munich being in great trouble and at a club where they're quite prone to change managers and bring in a more experienced manager like Heinke for the last couple of years, for example. They're not afraid to do that. I wonder whether that was deliberate.
That was what crossed my own mind when I saw that he'd done the interview in Bild, because, I can remember sort of speaking to him here, he would say that his childhood club was Bayern Munich. That was, he was born, he grew up on the French-German border, and that was the club that he grew up thinking, that was his club, Bayern Munich.
That's interesting.
So,
there's 2 reasons for us to write that story now.
Yeah. So watch this space. Maybe that's a story we'll be reporting on the FWA review in weeks to come, the comeback of Arsene Wenger. I hope so. Sam, thanks very much for joining us here at Arsenal, and we look forward to reading your article on this match and many more in the coming years.
Thanks, Lee.
Cheers.